Okay. So thanks for showing up. I know it's late in the afternoon. So this is the introductory session for Harbor. So we're going to talk about, what Harbor is as a project. It's meant to be a pretty light, high-level overview of, what the project does, where we are right now, and some of the features that we've worked on for the last 2 releases. And so I think we have a pretty mix of backgrounds in the audience. So maybe some of you have never heard of Harbor. Maybe some of you have used Harbor or a power user, or maybe some of you have been contributing to the project. So we just want to talk about, what it is, why it exists, and some of the features we've been working on for the 1.9 and 1.10 release. So I'm Alex. I am a Cloud Native Applications product manager at VMware, and I'm sort of leading the Harbor project. So I'm responsible for driving the roadmap, sharing the project with others, and collecting feedback so we can improve the project. And with me is Steven Rin, who is the engineering manager for the Harbor project.
Hi. Nice to meet you.
So first of all, what is Harbor? So if you think about what a registry is, it's essentially, so Harbor is a trusted cloud-native registry that stores, signs, and scans content. And so if you think about, what a registry is, it's basically a place to store your artifacts. So that's how I think about, something like Docker Hub. So when we set out to create this project, we wanted, a little more than that, right? So we didn't find something that satisfied our needs in terms of security, in terms of role-based access. So this is, we set out to build an on-prem registry that can do all of these things, right? That can sign content, that can scan content, all done from within the Harbor registry. So our mission is to be the best, the premier cloud-native registry for working with different types of artifacts. And so right now we support Docker images and Helm Charts, but we also have plans to support other emerging cloud-native artifact types. And there are plenty of these popping up. And so this is a brief timeline of the Harbor project. So it came through an internal effort to solve some issues we had in the VMware China R&D site, and we didn't find a registry that fit our needs. So there was an internal demo at some point in 2015. We got some pretty good feedback, and then the project was open sourced in 2016. And it was donated to CNCF in 2018. It went from sandbox to incubation fairly fast. So in November of last year, we went into incubation. And as of right now, we have almost 10K stars on GitHub, 120 plus contributors, and I think we have about 20 maintainers altogether. And so this is basically a high-level overview of the feature set that we have, divided into different areas. So, access control, replication to different registries, the ability to scan for vulnerabilities from within Harbor, the ability to sign images, Helm Chart management, a single web portal for managing all of your users and projects and images, support for APIs. We started supporting Swagger API as of 1.8, and the different types of deployment models that we have. So I'll go through each of these fairly quickly, spend about a minute on each. So role-based access control, right? So we had support for AD LDAP integration dating back to a very early release, and we added support for OHIDC in the 1.8 release. And introduced this concept of robot accounts, which allows you to control a specific subset of your project. So they have access to certain repositories in your project instead of the entire project, right? And so with local DB plus LDAP and OHIDC, we pretty much covered the entire range of authentication backends that people were using to access projects. Replication is the ability to sync images or replicate images from one Harbor registry to another. Basically, you can configure a replication target within Harbor to replicate your images to, or you can pull images from So that could be Harbor, it could be one of the other cloud native registries that we support right now. So AWS ECR, or AWS ECR, GCP GCR, Azure ACR, as well as Huawei Cloud and Alibaba Cloud registries are all supported. And then we have the ability to scan images from within the Harbor Web Console. So we leverage a project called Claire, which is an image scanner developed by CoreOS. And so you can scan images from within Harbor, and you can also apply policies on top of that, right? So you can prevent images that scan positive for vulnerabilities to be, you can disallow these images to be pulled or deployed from the Harbor registry. We use Notary or Docker Content Trust for signing images. And then we have a policy engine on top of that as well. So you can disallow pulling any images that doesn't have a signature from the Harbor registry. So full support for Helm Charts through the Chart Museum. And the entire day-to-day operations is done through the Harbor Web Console that you log into on your browser, and you interact with it either through kubelet or Docker CLI, depending on how you deploy Harbor. Full support for Swagger UI. And so right now we have 3 deployments. You can deploy Harbor with just basic Docker Compose. You can deploy it as a Kubernetes solution, as a Kubernetes cluster through Helm Charts. And finally, BOSH is a very opinionated approach that Cloud Foundry and some other VMware and PKS, VMware and Pivotal products are using. So this is very much an open source project, but there are other enterprise-grade, commercially licensed solutions from VMware and Pivotal that are currently using Harbor, right? So we get feedback both from the open source community as well as from the enterprise-grade sales and engineering. So this is a high-level architecture of what Harbor looks like right now. So basically, from the user perspective, as a consumer, you interact through the web portal, which is on your web browser, and you push and pull images to your Harbor registry through kubelet or Docker CLI, and then all the other features that I just introduced. They have their own individual containers. They're running in Harbor Core, and we utilize certain third-party software, right? So we use Claire for scanning. We use Notary for signing. So for scan providers, right, we've added new scanners as part of a 1.10 story. So for the latest release, we worked on the feature that I'll introduce in a little bit to add additional scanners, scanning software beyond just Claire, and replication targets to all these different cloud registries that we support right now. Data access layer, a Redis for caching SQL database, and then your storage backend that you use for actually storing the images and charts. It could be anything. It could be block file, object storage. So we tested against S3, NFS, and OpenStack, and so pretty flexible. So I want to go over 2 features that we received a lot of feedback on that the users really like. The first one is replication. So this is the ability to replicate images and charts from one Harbor to another replication target, which may or may not be a Harbor instance. Full support for replicating charts and Docker images and charts, and you can configure this to be in pull or push mode, right? So you can pull images from the replication target, or you can push images to the replication target, but granted you have access to the replication target. And so these are the replication targets that we support currently. We actually started with Alibaba and Huawei, and we've since added support for AWS, GCP, and Azure Cloud. And we also have a couple more coming in the 1.10 release. So Quay, replication to and from Quay, replication to and from JFrog, DTR, these are all in the roadmap. And OHIDC was a feature that a lot of people have asked for, and so this was part of the 1.8 release. And this essentially allows you to basically configure everything on the OHIDC provider side and then transfer that over to the harbor side without having to reconfigure all the user permissions on the harbor side, right? So imagine if you're a user and you're part of a group that you configure on the OHIDC provider. By authenticating through the OHIDC provider and logging onto harbor. So if a user A was part of a group, was part of a group A, then he has certain permissions into different projects, into project A and B. But user B belonging to a different group, when he logs in through the OHIDC into harbor, he only has access to project B and not project A. And so these are the OHIDC providers that we've tested against. So Google, Dex, Pingfetter, Keycloak. We also tested against Auth0 and Okta, which will be in the 1.10 release. So I want to spend a couple minutes talking about, really just the features that we worked on for 1.9 and 1.10, because up to this point, everything I've talked about, we really had since the last KubeCon at Barcelona. So I don't want this to be just a complete rehash, even though it is an introductory session. So we try to have a theme to every release. And so if you try to think about, what I just talked about up to 1.9, we've really had a container registry that can store, scan, and sign content. And then we added cross-registry support, like replication. We added being able to authenticate against different backends, like OHIDC and LDAP and things like that. So the story for 1.9 was really to build off that and improve areas in multi-tenancy and lifecycle management. So you can divide the feature set into two groups, two categories. So there are management-related features, and there are features for extensibility. So real quick, just going through these. The first one is project quotas, which allows the project admin to set quotas on his project, right? So he can set a hard limit on the size of his project, either based on the number of artifacts that you can have in the project at any given time, or based on the disk space that it can use, right? So that allows you to define boundaries. And if you were to push an artifact to a registry and you exceed the quota at some point, mid-push, the push would be rejected, and you would get an error message, and you'd have to run garbage collection to clean up the data and deallocate. Another lifecycle management feature is tag retention. So this kind of goes hand in hand with project quotas. So this is the ability to configure retention policies based on image tags. So retention here referring to how long the images can live on your registry before they're deleted and garbage collected. So prior to this, we really didn't have any automated mechanism for deleting images off the registry. So this kind of allows the project admin to configure a replication or a retention policy based on the repository name and the image tag names, right? So you can potentially configure retention policies such as, I want all image tags that has the name or has prod or production inside the image tag name to be retained for 2 weeks, or I want everything that's matching test or qual to be deleted within 5 days of being pushed to the registry, things like that. Logging endpoints, so we've allowed being able to export all the logs to a central syslog endpoint, so that way you can integrate with more full-blown syslog or login solutions like FluentBit or LogInsight, et cetera. We've also worked hard to improve the performance and scalability of Harbor. So performance here referring to the number of users you can have that you can have on the Harbor instance, the number of image pushes and image pulls, the number of images that can live on the registry, be able to scale the Harbor cluster. And we also have a highly available solution for a deployment model for Harbor when deployed as a Kubernetes cluster. Extensibility, we've added webhook support. So webhook is a pretty common concept that, basically, instead of actively pulling for information, it would reactively send notifications after certain events have occurred, right? So this means that the Harbor admin can now set a post endpoint for his project so that anytime he performs certain actions, like he pushes an image to the registry or he deletes it, or there's a replication or an image scan, the post endpoint will receive a webhook notification in the form of a JSON payload. So you can imagine if you had an action listener on that endpoint capable of interpreting and acting on the payload, right? You can really integrate your registry into the rest of your stack to form this complete CI/CD pipeline. And finally, we worked hard to deliver this story around pluggable scanners, which is the ability for Harbor to pair with multiple scanners. So, like I mentioned, we've always used Claire up top here. This is the first scan provider, and it has worked well for us in the past in capturing vulnerabilities. But as the image scanning landscape or the container security landscape is shifting, we've had more and more users come to us and say, I'm interested in such and such scanner, or my company has already paid for such and such. Can I use that with Harbor? And the answer, previously was always no, right? You have to dump the images off the Harbor registry and then put it on the environment where you can run the scanning solutions. And so, we started talking to scanning vendors like Aqua Security and Encore to develop this sort of out-of-tree solution that allows the Harbor sysadmin to install and configure multiple scanners at once, right? And so, as a system admin can configure multiple scanners, and then as a project admin, when you go to actually use to run a scan job on your images, you can select from the list of configure scanners to use, and you can potentially run multiple scanners on the same image at some point. So we call the framework that we use to realize this an interrogation service, because it's not just limited to image scanners. So right now it's mostly image scanners, but this out-of-tree solution allows us to extend this capability to other things like compliance checking software, license checkers, et cetera. So that's sort of the feature set that I wanted to cover. Just a little update on the community. So we have almost 10K stars on GitHub with 200 plus contributors, 14 maintainers spanning 6 organizations. And we also have 20 plus product implementations leveraging Harbor. So, the big ones, the VMware Pivotal PKS, which is our enterprise-grade Kubernetes solution, is leveraging Harbor. So Essential PKS and Enterprise PKS are both leveraging Harbor. We also have other companies, internet companies in China and in Europe, managed service providers who are also leveraging Harbor. They've either built a service on top of Harbor or they've packaged Harbor into their product. So we're seeing a lot of traction, right? And we're getting feedback from both the open source and enterprise solutions. We also have bi-weekly meetings every 2 weeks, Wednesday night. So we have 2 sessions, one for our audience in Asia and one for North American and European. And basically it's a status update on the project. We do some customer sharings, we do some demos on the features that we're working on. And all the meetings are recorded and stored on GitHub. So, please take a look and see if this is the type of thing you're into. And so we welcome all levels of participation, either as an end user, you can share your experiences about Harbor, you can file issues on GitHub, things you like, things you don't like. You can attend community meetings to learn more about the project or to share your usage cases. And one level up is a contributor, right? So the contributor has more responsibilities. Or not responsibilities, the contributor has more involvement. So he's probably involved in submitting PRs, fixing bugs, working with the Harbor product team to submit feature requests and attending meetings and sharing usage of Harbor. And then finally, as a maintainer, you have more responsibilities. So you have to work with the Harbor team from start to finish. So be involved in the planning stage, to code review, and then work with release engineering to make sure we release according to our cadence. And come to presentations like these and host meetings. So that's my portion. And then we have a demo set up for you for the last 10 minutes. And so Stephen will do that.
Okay, thank you, Alex. Yeah, now it is the demo time. So before I go into demo, and I want to ask a question. Is there anybody who has played with Harbor before? Install Harbor or play some feature? Okay, nice. And so today, my demo is mainly focused on the 1.9 feature and 1.10 feature. So there's always a conflict between administrator and developer, right? From an administrator perspective, he would like to control what storage and what artifacts the developer can use. But from developer perspective, he wants to consume as more storage as he can. That's the reason we have introduced quota management to allow administrator to control how many images the developer can upload and how many storage he can use. And in the same time, that we also enable some feature like tag retention and tag immutability to allow the developer to maintain what are the important images and to clean up all the unnecessary images he will not use. And he also can register webhook messages to get notifications when those events happen. So with that introduction, I'm going to my lab demo. Yeah, before I go into the deep demo, let me introduce the persona here. Here, Naomi is a developer, and the Ming has created a project called Naomi minus DEV for Naomi to use, and the administrator has also set Naomi as the project Ming. And when the administrator created the project, he has actually set short limits in interest of this demo. So he has set in 5 artifacts account, which means the Naomi can only upload 5 artifacts, including either images or Helm chart. And he also configure 300 megabyte storage consumption, so Naomi can only consume 300 megabytes storage. So let me log out and log in with Naomi. Yeah, so Naomi can see his project quota as well. So he can also log in, use his user password. And once he has logged in, I have created a script. We can just take a look at the script. This script including 6 images, and I have set in 2 images with RC tag, and also has set in image with KubeCon 2019 tag, which is a developed build, but I want to use that for my demo. So what Naomi can do is he just push this image to Harbor Registry, and we can see that when the 6th image being pushed, because we have set in a quota of 5, so he will get an error, and so he cannot push the 6th image. At this stage, there are several options Naomi can do. And the first option is he can ask admin to increase my quota, and so he can push more images. And the other option is that he can go through his repositories and check each of the images and see what are the important images I want to keep and what are the unnecessary images I want to delete. But this is very time consuming. And what we are going to demo is that actually he can set a tag retention rule, allow him to keep what he thinks is important. So for this example, I have created a rule. So in this rule, what I said is that, so for all the repositories in this project, if its build is RC build, and I want to maintain this RC build. And there are also other options, as Alex had already introduced. You can also retain the recent pulled images or recent push images and recent 30 days images, all those options. But for my demo, I will use retain always to keep this RC build. And in the same time, because I also want to keep my dev build for the demo, so I also created a tag immutability rule, which is very similar semantics that he can creating a rule which matching the Kubernetes Conference 2019 tag. So once the immutability rule is set, what it means that you cannot delete it and you cannot even overwrite it, so nobody can change it. So you are safe to demo during your demo time. So let me to run the tag retention. So usually, if you run a tag retention directly, we will pop up a warning to you. And so because if you run it and it will cannot recover rollback, so it's better that you do a dry run first. And I just click a dry run. And we also have a very nice table showed here. And if you look at this column, and you can see there are 2 images retained. Oh, I think it should be 3. Let me check what happened. Yeah, in this tag immutability feature, we also have a feature called enable or disable. Because I have performed many times, so I disable this rule. You can also now enable it. And once you enable it, you can do a dry run again. What you can see is that, this is pending. Let me do a refresh. Yeah, you can see these 3 images with RC tag and with the KubeCon 2019 tag are remained, and other 2 are deleted. So I can run it quickly. Yeah, let me check the repository. Yeah, so now you have cleaned the 2 unnecessary images, and you get your storage back, and you can continue to push that image. Let me try to push my previous feed images, the prepare image, and I have created a push script. As you can see, I will push this image again, and it should succeed. Yeah, so let me check. Now we should have 4 images. And so I also want to demo, so during this process, if somebody want to change the image who has set an immutable tag, and it will marking as failed. Yeah, we will click clearly pop-up error said that this is configured as immutable, so you cannot overwrite it. So besides the artifacts account quotas, we can also support storage consumption. So another example I can show is that we can also push image. The Golang image is like nearly 300 megabytes, and if we want to push this image, and you will get an error. Yeah, and you cannot push the image because you have exceeded the storage quota. Yeah, with that, there's also some question people will ask is that, so usually all the CI/CD pipelines are pushed without manual doing Docker push, right? How do you know you exceed the quota? Actually, we have a Webhook feature, which you can enable the Webhook. You can configure Webhook server URL, and once you configure it, you will get the Webhook, like push images, pull images, delete images. All those events will be sent to your Webhook server. So I have configured this server. So yeah, you can see there's a project quota exceed happened. So you can know, and you will exist your quota, and you can take further actions to clear images, or either you really need so much of storage or quotas, you can ask admin to give you more quotas. With that, I have completed my demo, and thank you. And there's also another cool feature is the Pluggable Scanner. We will have more deep dive session in tomorrow's session, and Daniel and Stephen Joe will share that with you. So I'm not going to demo that. And if you want to meet us in the Meet container, and you can also reach us in the answer bar in the showcase space. And last is that, so please, if you are interested, you can join any Slack channel or GitHub with us, and you can also email us. Thank you.
If you guys have any questions, we have a few minutes that you can answer questions as well.
How is this typically deployed? Into a own Kubernetes cluster or installed in some other kind of fashion?
Yeah, you can either deploy in Kubernetes or Docker environment.
What's the best practice, or what's the industry, or what's the production-ready way to deploy this?
Yeah, so if you're looking at putting hardware in a development environment or for dev tests, you put in Docker Compose. It's easy. You just run a couple of commands, and you have hardware up and running using our container images. If you want to put in a production environment, we have a Helm Chart that you can deploy, and you can put it on top of Kubernetes. There's a fully highly available installation with Redis AJ, Postgres AJ, then all the hardware components go into pods in Kubernetes, and then you can front end it with an ingress controller that can also be highly available. So that's the production scenario for hardware that's fully supported. And if you go into our GitHub account, there's a Helm chart that you can follow the instructions and documentation.
Thank you. Yeah.
So while notary is the standard for signing in Docker and Docker distribution universe, those of us over on the cryo side, prior art for signing is typically GPG. Have you considered alternate signing scheme?
Daniel, do you want to answer the question?
In short, we will stick with notary because notary is making improvement. They have a session tomorrow that they will better handle this signature replication in the multi-registry world, and we are moving toward the OCI. I envision that probably TUF and notary will still be the most recommended way for signing any OCI artifact. And currently for the Helm chart, we introduced GPG, but I don't think we are getting away from notary very soon. Yeah. Yes, yes. Actually, Harbor wraps the Docker Registry API and call the API to remove the artifact. And to really free the storage, you need to run the GC. We are actively exploring an option to run the GC without having to put Harbor into read-only. Yeah, probably in a future release you'll see that. We have some ideas, but still verifying them. Please.
You have any support for rollback access?
Sorry?
RBAC support.
Yeah, so today Harbor has RBAC support in terms of different user roles who have a guest, a limited guest, an administrator, and a master, and they have very specific permissions that are baked into Harbor, so you can control the permissions, and they're tied to a project today. We're looking at a couple of features down the line around creating more of a namespace where you can have permissions that span more than one project. We haven't designed that yet, but that's something that we want to do down the line. So today, RBAC is user management that could come from OHIDC or LDAP, tied to a project with specific roles that have specific permissions.
So where exactly do the artifacts live? Are they in Kubernetes or are they on some other service, like an ECR or
You mean the artifacts within Harbor?
Yeah, because I saw something about a persistent volume claim, and I also see mentions about using some service like ECR.
So
what's the relationship there?
So we basically wrap around the Docker registry. So we use the Docker distribution upstream. So the actual content lives within the Docker registry, and we have services built around that. The ECR you're talking about is you can configure ECR as a replication target of Harbor, so you can sync images to ECR, to and from ECR basically. But ECR is not part of the Harbor architecture in any way.
I think what he's asking is a little bit different. So today, if you host your images in Harbor, they have to rely on some form of storage, right? So if you are running Harbor in a Kubernetes environment, you get a persistent volume claim that basically will run into a PV, and then that could be GCR, it could be an S3 compatible storage, it could be local storage. And you get to figure out what any storage that's supported by Kubernetes for persistent volumes will also work in Harbor. If you have Harbor in Docker using Docker Compose, then it's whatever you have configured in that environment as well.
Do you provide service codes integration for Kubernetes or logging?
Can you repeat that question, sorry?
Mail service.
Provide a service code, Kubernetes service code support.
Do we have Kubernetes servers?
Right now we don't.
I don't think so. But if there's a specific scenario that you're interested in, come on Harbor GitHub, file an issue, talk to us about what you're looking for, and we can evaluate that and see what we can do. Yeah.
Is there any work being done on integrating with Prometheus for generating attestations?
Not currently. The question was if we have an integration with Graphias, but between Graphias and other tools like OPA, that's something that we definitely need to look at down the line. We just haven't had the resources to work on that. If anybody really feels passionate about policies or attestations, please come to us. We'll help you get jump started and help us deliver that in Harbor. So question up top.
So like for quotas, right? Is it just like if all images are based on the same, from Ubuntu to front end, is the quota just what your developers add to them, or is it the entire image?
It's
Like they share layers.
Yeah, the quota is on a shared layer system. So if you have one single base image and everything else derives from it, in a single project, it will only be counted once. But when you span projects, we'll count it again, right? So on disk, you will get the disk efficiencies, but not the Harbor quota efficiencies if you have the same image in multiple projects. But within a single project, we'll reference that base image only once.
Yeah, we are counting the layers. Yeah.
So it's different from how Docker does it natively. They will actually reach across all namespaces. when calculating the sharing of the blobs, but our projects, hardware projects, are completely siloed. So 2 images that share a base layer, but in 2 different projects, they count twice. So it's a different. We're striving for a different.
Like the name of the image. Is that what you mean?
So the hardware project is, think of hardware as being built in a way that you can deliver it as a multi-tenant service to organizations and developers within your environment. And the way to do that is basically you create these logical boundaries, which is called a project. And the project has everything tied to it: policy, users, as well as the images that you have in it. So that's why we count the code on a per project basis. So if you want to deliver a project to organization A and another one to organization B, you can basically enforce code that separately and build them for it as well. I see Stephen Wong coming in, so do you have a session here?
I'm going to the next one after this, but.
Oh, okay. I thought
Thank you.
you're kicking us out. But we are almost out of time, so what we'll do is we'll probably stay around if you guys have any more questions, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you all.
Yeah, please join our tomorrow's session for deep dive.